1 minute ago, the unthinkable happened. A message from Moscow blasted across intelligence channels with a severity Britain has not seen in decades. A warning so direct, so cold, so calculated, it sent shockwaves through Parliament before officials could even finish reading it. This wasn't diplomatic language. This wasn't subtle pressure. This was a threat, explicit, immediate and deadly. And within seconds, the United Kingdom triggered emergency protocols that have only ever been rehearsed, never executed. What you're about to hear is not politics. This is the moment national security cracked open in real time. Tonight didn't begin with debates or rumours. It began with a single encrypted transmission intercepted by British intelligence at 6:03 p.m. A transmission authenticated by 3 separate agencies before any official dared to read it aloud. The message came directly from Vladimir Putin's Security Council. Short, sharp, unmistakable. A declaration that any further British involvement in Eastern Europe would be treated not as diplomacy, not as deterrence, but as hostility. And the final line was what sent shock through the highest levels of government. Consequences will be decisive. Consequences will be immediate. That phrasing is rare. It is deliberate. It signals action, not negotiation. Within minutes, Parliament went into lockdown procedures, doors sealed, communications scrambled, MPs pulled into secured rooms they didn't even know existed. A red alert was issued to the Ministry of Defence, an alert classification rarely spoken aloud because its activation confirms one thing: the nation is entering a zone of strategic danger, not theoretical danger, not predicted danger, immediate danger. The kind that forces governments to move faster than they can think. Across London, officials watched real-time satellite feeds showing unusual military movements across Russia's western regions. Armoured units shifting at speeds that didn't match training exercises. Missile batteries repositioning in patterns. Intelligence officers described as strategic posturing with offensive potential. Naval frequencies spiked. Submarine signatures changed depth. Britain's early warning systems began flagging anomalies across the North Atlantic. None of this was random. None of this was accidental. Every signal pointed to a deliberate show of force timed perfectly with Putin's warning. Inside the emergency briefing room, the atmosphere turned heavy. Advisors spoke in clipped sentences. Intelligence chiefs presented data no one wanted to hear. They explained how Russia's recent moves weren't just military, they were psychological, designed to push Britain toward panic, designed to shake public confidence, designed to test whether the UK still possessed the resolve to stand firm in an era where every misstep carries global consequences. The Prime Minister understood instantly that this wasn't about diplomacy. It was about leverage. It was about intimidation. It was about Putin signalling that he was prepared to cross lines that had remained untouched since the Cold War. But while Parliament absorbed the shock, another crisis took shape outside its walls. Panic spread across social media as fragments of the intercepted message leaked. Not the details, just one chilling phrase: immediate consequences. Those 2 words ignited fear before officials could control the narrative. Phones lit up across the UK. Families texted each other to stay alert. Journalists scrambled for confirmation. Airports increased security without waiting for orders. Military bases went into restricted access mode. The public sensed something was wrong long before the government could explain it. Behind closed doors, Britain's defence experts issued one warning that eclipsed everything else. Putin's threat wasn't empty. Russia had recently tested weapon systems specifically designed for rapid retaliation, hypersonic missiles capable of reaching European targets in minutes, cyber units capable of crippling power grids before officials even detect the breach. These weren't theoretical concerns, they were real, documented, and now activated in intelligence briefings flashing red. And this led to the most alarming development of the night. Parliament initiated Directive Nightfall, an emergency order used only when national stability is at risk. It requires every major department to prepare for simultaneous scenarios: military escalation, cyber attack, infrastructure disruption, and public unrest. The moment that directive appeared on the screens of government officials, they knew this situation had crossed a threshold. The kind of threshold from which no country emerges unchanged. Yet the real fear wasn't the threat of itself. The real fear was the timing. Why now? Why this message? Why this escalation? Intelligence analysts believe Putin issued the warning for one strategic reason. He sensed weakness, not military weakness, political weakness. The UK has been drowning in domestic crises, tensions, protests and policy conflicts, a distracted nation, a divided government, a population exhausted from years of instability. And that creates the exact environment a foreign adversary exploits. For the first time in years, officials admitted privately that Britain may not have the unified strength needed to absorb a threat of this magnitude, because national threats don't strike when countries are prepared. They strike when countries are vulnerable. And right now, Britain is vulnerable in ways the public does not yet fully understand. What unfolded tonight wasn't routine, it wasn't theatrical, it wasn't symbolic. It was a clear signal that geopolitical pressure has reached its breaking point. And what happens next will determine whether Britain enters the most dangerous chapter of its modern history. What happened next inside the walls of Westminster was nothing short of chaos. Quiet chaos, the kind that spreads through whispers, stiff faces and trembling hands. The warning from Moscow had not only reached the top levels of government, it had split Parliament in half. Some MPs demanded retaliation, others begged for restraint, and in the middle stood a Prime Minister who suddenly realised the United Kingdom was walking blindfolded across a minefield. No alarms blared publicly, no emergency broadcasts flashed across television screens, but behind closed doors, Britain entered its most dangerous hour in decades. The message sent from the Kremlin was so sharp, so direct, so brutally precise that intelligence officials described it as a line drawn in fire. Putin did not use vague language. He did not speak in metaphors. He delivered a plain, cold warning. One that suggested the UK had crossed a boundary Russia would not tolerate. And the most chilling part, he delivered it through channels normally reserved for wartime communication, a method only activated when diplomacy is no longer part of the conversation. As the details were passed around the room, senior ministers fell into a silence so heavy it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. MI6 briefings were read under dim lights with security personnel lined along the walls. Maps were spread across a long oak table tracing routes, threats and vulnerabilities, none of which anyone wanted to admit existed. Because according to the intelligence report, a single misstep by the UK could trigger a response that would shake Europe. And deep down, they all knew something was wrong, that something beyond the public narrative, like something that had pushed Putin to the point of issuing a warning this extreme. Was it the UK's involvement abroad? Was it military support? Was it covert operations Moscow had quietly uncovered? Or was it, as one advisor hinted in a trembling voice, a hidden move the public was never supposed to know? By this time, the Speaker of the House had been informed. Senior laws were called from their homes and, for the first time in years, emergency protocols coded in red ink were retrieved from locked drawers. The UK had not entered war, but it had stepped into a zone where one wrong decision could make war unavoidable. Members of Parliament exchanged glances that betrayed fear, confusion and anger. And still, the most important question hung heavily in the room. What exactly did Putin know? Reports suggested that Russian satellites had detected unusual activity around UK strategic sites. Others claim Putin's warning referenced secret alliances and covert deployments. Whatever the truth was, everyone agreed on one thing. Russia had eyes where the UK did not expect them. That meant this was not just a warning. This was a demonstration of power, a reminder that Moscow was watching, calculating, preparing. Then came the turning point. A classified document was placed on the Prime Minister's desk. Its contents were so sensitive that even senior ministers were asked to leave the room. Only a handful of officials remained behind the locked steel door. The file revealed the exact trigger that had provoked the Kremlin, and once the Prime Minister finished reading, his face lost all colour. Without saying a word, he ordered immediate action that would ripple across the entire government within minutes. Suddenly, Parliament was instructed to halt certain debates, suspend planned announcements and cancel external briefings. Unmarked vehicles began arriving at Westminster. Intelligence officers rushed through corridors carrying encrypted devices, and a new directive stamped Priority 1 was distributed through secure channels. This was not a drill. This was not speculation. This was Parliament preparing for the possibility of a hostile move, one that could come without warning. Behind the scenes, top military commanders were summoned. Communications with NATO were scrambled into a private channel, and the UK's cyber defence units were ordered into full alert. It was the fastest mobilisation since the early 2000s, but nothing about it was shown to the public. The country went about its day, unaware that at that very moment, British intelligence believed a strike, military, digital or strategic, was not only possible but increasingly likely. And as tensions reached their peak, one last detail emerged as something that shocked even those who thought they had seen everything. Putin's warning, according to a declassified note, did not end with a threat. It ended with a countdown, a time frame, a limit, a moment after which Russia would respond without hesitation. And that countdown had already started. The moment officials realised the countdown had already begun, the atmosphere inside Westminster turned completely. Fear turned into urgency, uncertainty turned into silent panic, and every second that passed felt like a step closer to an invisible line Britain could not afford to cross. Senior advisors leaned over secure monitors, analysts whispered updates into earpieces, and military liaisons moved with an urgency that revealed the truth. This was no longer a political issue. This was a national survival scenario. The Prime Minister ordered an emergency intelligence sweep, an operation designed to uncover every possible clue behind Russia's sudden escalation. Devices were seized, communications were filtered, every piece of information passing through government networks was scanned for irregularities. Meanwhile, cyber units reported unusual patterns, unknown signals bouncing across European servers, encrypted messages that experts believe came from Russian-linked groups, and digital probes targeting UK infrastructure at levels not seen in years. Nothing had been fully activated yet, but the signs were clear. This was preparation, this was positioning. This was Russia testing the UK's defences before making its next move. Inside a restricted command room, generals outlined scenarios on a large digital board. Each scenario ended with the same conclusion. If the UK misread Russia's intentions or responded with even a hint of aggression, the situation could spiral uncontrollably. One wrong word, one miscalculated statement, one strategic mistake could trigger something irreversible. Even MPs who had been sceptical of the threat were now silent, understanding that the countdown wasn't symbolic. It was a real-time indicator of how close Britain was to a potential confrontation. Across the country, intelligence officers quietly increased security at energy facilities, airports, submarine bases and communication hubs. The public noticed nothing unusual, but behind the scenes, Britain was fortifying itself in anticipation of the unknown. The fear was not that Russia would launch a dramatic attack. The real fear was something far more cunning, something that could cripple the country without a single missile being fired. A cyber blackout, a hit on financial systems, a strategic strike on satellites. Any of these could send the UK into instant chaos. And then, just as the pressure reached its peak, an encrypted alert appeared on the Prime Minister's secure device. The room froze as he read it. British intelligence had intercepted a secondary message, one believed to originate from a classified Russian command channel. The contents were short, precise, and impossible to misinterpret. It stated that Russia had identified a red line breach and was now preparing its response options. These options were listed in stages, and the first stage involved actions that would shake the UK far more than the initial warning. That message forced Parliament to make a move it had avoided until now. A new emergency order was issued, one that activated Britain's highest level of internal defence without declaring a national emergency. Special units were deployed to undisclosed locations. Additional satellite data was pulled from allied networks. And a small circle of decision makers prepared for a scenario that only a handful of people in the country even knew existed. The truth was simple. Russia's warning was not just a threat. It was a signal that Britain had stepped into a confrontation built on secrets, intelligence operations, and geopolitical lines the public had never heard of. And whoever crossed this line, whether intentionally or through miscalculation, had pushed the world closer to a dangerous moment. But then came the most shocking update of the night. An intelligence officer rushed into the room carrying a fresh report. His voice was unsteady as he delivered the news. Russian strategic forces had been observed making an unusual movement. Not full mobilization, not preparation for an attack, something else, something more specific, more focused, and far more alarming. Military analysts quickly interpreted the data. The movement pointed to a targeted option, a pressure tactic meant to corner the UK into compliance, a move designed to remind Britain that Russia held an advantage in areas few nations dared to challenge. The Prime Minister demanded confirmation, and within minutes it arrived. The intelligence was real. The shift was real. Russia was positioning itself for direct confrontation if its warning continued to be ignored. And the most chilling part?